Thanks, everyone. My name is Steve Sorensen. I work for Johnson & Johnson. I'm a vice president in technology solutions, which in J&J language is sort of our shared services team, where we're accountable and responsible for building and deploying all of the solutions that are used at Johnson & Johnson, including from the top to the bottom of the stack. I'm going to talk to you today a little bit less about the technology component and around the bits and bytes of the solution that we built here in Johnson & Johnson, but more around why we think it's a showcase product and why we think that using the Geode solution in what we call our enterprise data grid has become one of the centerpieces in our technology future. So hopefully you in the audience as architects and developers can appreciate the journey that we're on and where we're applying all the good work that each one of you guys are doing. Before we begin, the story doesn't really come together unless you understand where the starting point is. And I wanted to share a little bit with you around Johnson & Johnson at the risk of most of you knowing what kind of company we are. There are always a few people in the audience that don't realize what we really do as a company. Everyone thinks of us as a baby products company. They think of us as a beauty products company. But the reality is we're so much more than that. I mean, we're a company made up of 270 different operating companies within one entity. We have three major units, medical devices, pharmaceuticals, and commercial products, which are the beauty products that everybody's familiar with. We also have a half of a unit we call surgical vision, which make contact lenses. They bounce in and out of sectors all the time. But the reason I say this is because it's a very complex ecosystem of companies that we have there. We've been in business for 130 years. We have multiple divestitures and acquisitions going on all the time. It's part of the life for us. It's how we grew. We have 16 growing on at the moment. Probably it'll be 20 by Friday and maybe back down to 16 by next Monday. We are the sixth largest healthcare company on the planet. We have revenue of $70 billion. We sell in 175 different locations or countries around the world. And we have 64 ERPs. I had to throw this one in because it's near and dear to my heart. We have 64 ERPs in our company, which actually, we're proud of that number now because it was over 100 5 or 6 years ago before I got here. So incredibly complex. Annual IT budget of $2 billion that we spend extremely wisely across the corporation. So here are some of the products we create. Again, some of them may look familiar to you. Some of them may not look familiar to you. Again, the reason I'm giving you this information is because each of these products follow a different pathway in our own organization. As IT professionals, we need to understand this. We can't just build programs and solutions and platforms agnostically to the industry that we're in. So earlier today, there's a gentleman up on stage that was from Citi, and I just thought his business model was fascinating. He talked about how they were using Geode to solve some of the business needs that he had in his organization. Well, at Johnson & Johnson, we're primarily a manufacturing organization. We make the majority of the products we sell, whether it be sutures that are used in the operating room, implants that go into your hips, knees, shoulders, all over your body, pharmaceutical, biologic products that you ingest, put into your body every day, or the baby care products or beauty products that you see on the shelf. Each one of them follow different pathways in order to get to production. Each one of them have different sales and marketing models that they use to get to their customers, and each one of them have different distribution models that they use to get products to their customers. Some of them heavily regulated. As you can imagine, we have something that's called SOX, which everybody has, of course, from a financial standpoint, but we also have something called GXP, Good Manufacturing, Good Laboratory Practices, which means we're heavily regulated by the FDA, which means everything we do has to be documented, controlled, proven, tested, and so forth. So it's just a bit of a nuance. I thought that was important to share with the team as we went through our journey. So what were our challenges? As Johnson & Johnson, what kind of challenges were we facing in the industry that may or may not be relevant to others in the industry? I mean, I think everybody has challenges these days, right? I mean, you can't stand still or your business model moves out from under you. Some of the unique ones for us that are relevant to the solution we put in. Millions of new patients are entering the system, right? They're entering into the managed care system. They're entering into the hospital networks. They're subscribing to pharmaceuticals. They're just becoming part of what we would call the overall system. So patients are customers, and the customers are also customers of some of our customers. So you're seeing that we have an extreme proliferation now of endpoints where our products end up. We're seeing massive consolidation in the industry. I mentioned earlier around the mergers and acquisitions that we go through internally just to stay competitive in our own environment. But what we're seeing, and I'm sure what you guys are seeing, are consolidation across the enterprise. Insurance companies consolidating with script companies, distribution companies. We're seeing that hospitals and networks and insurers are all now consolidating as well. We're making some consolidations in our supply chain and in our wholesalers. So with our wholesalers, so the models themselves are changing dramatically. And this is probably not a huge deal as a customer because you're just getting your products from someplace else, or you're just figuring out how to live within these new models. But as a company like Johnson & Johnson that have deeply embedded roots everywhere, this has tremendous ramifications on our back-end systems and all the data that we keep, all the data and all the transactions that we need to enable. So it's very, very disruptive for us. We have expanding care venues. I don't remember the exact percentages, but more and more now we're seeing people taking care outside of the hospitals. It used to be that you showed up at the hospital, you received everything you needed, you went home, you followed up, you went back to the hospital. Not anymore. Now you're getting care sometimes through your phone, right? We have GXP applications that are coming through, software software as a service coming through your phone. Right? We have software as a medical device coming in through your implants. So now, more and more than ever, you're getting your care in places that you didn't used to get it before. Of course, we're all subject to this. We have advocacy policymakers. I don't know if there are other topics talked about more on Capitol Hill as we're very close to that today than healthcare. It's one of the leading topics that come up in every election, right? And it's important. People want to know where they're getting their healthcare from, how much it's going to cost, and what quality they're going to be entitled to. So these are things that we have to consider all of the time as we're building our own models internally and we're responding to questions and answers in the marketplace. We're also seeing a shift towards outcomes. Again, it used to be that you would make a product, sell a product become ingested, prescribed, taken. Not so much anymore. Now we're getting into relationships and risk-sharing relationships with our customers and our customers' customers where we're actually selling and ensuring the outcomes of the patients, not just the actual procedures. And that's a completely different model because outcomes are based on a lot more than just providing the product. It's also heavily based on processes, procedures, individual patient data. That's the big one. That's a little bit of foreshadowing. Individual patient data that we need to understand in order to make sure that the entire experience is tailored towards your needs. Okay, I'm having trouble reading this right now a little bit. I'm going to lean in a little bit. So what is it that our business wants? I described to you the environment that we have here. What does our business need in order to stay competitive in this case? And what are they demanding from us as IT professionals? Well, not much, right? Just the usual. They want a single source of data that's harmonized, it's accurate, it's high quality, and it's readily available through any source or platform that you could think of, okay? It allows us to, they want to be able to optimally interact with their strategic customers, right? So as I described, Johnson & Johnson, we may sell to the same customer through multiple different channels. Well, we know this customer has multiple different names. We can't make blockbuster deals or really manage our customer relationships when we're dealing with them at 100 different touch points. So our business wants us to be able to have single touch points with our customers and our suppliers as well. As the supply chain and the sales and marketing channels are starting to extend left and right through the business, we need to have single views of that end-to-end model, or else we're still doing things one-off and we're being left behind by our customers. We need to have harmonized data. It needs to be positioned with business priorities and linked across our silos, even internally, right? Our engineering departments will create products, SKUs, mod codes, things like that are being developed through use of certain technology. They'll go into what we call tech transfer into the manufacturing, which they get another identity, which goes into sales and marketing, and they're sold as another identity. And now we try to roll that all up and do the financial closing of all of this. And we're spending hundreds and hundreds of man-hours worth of people, probably more like man-years of people, trying to just do our normal back office functions. So we really need a single view of this data. Okay, and I did just glance as I turned the page there, also to enable the mergers and acquisitions. It's a way of life for us. It's been a strategic weapon for us. So, merging with another company is not easy, as I'm sure many of you in the audience who have gone through this understand. It's very cool in the front end, right? It's very cool to see two companies come together or see companies separate and become strategic. But on the back ends, all the agreements, all the negotiations, all of the temporary and semi-temporary integrations and systems that need to be built in order to keep business running can sometimes be a nightmare. But the companies that can do this well and that can do this fast and can do this with an isolated, fast view, they have a competitive advantage. Okay, so what did we do? We in IT, what did we do? We gave them everything that they wanted, right? We just crossed our fingers and made it all happen. Of course not. It was impossible. The way we were structured at the time, 64 ERPs, hundreds of data warehouses, we couldn't respond. We couldn't respond to our own business needs to stay competitive. And it wasn't fair. It wasn't fair to ask them to continue to innovate new products and bring them to market and not be part of the solution, instead be part of the dysfunction. So some of the things that stood in our way, the growth by acquisition strategy, as I talked about, great for sales, absolutely great for market share, but it's terrible because we didn't have the processes or the methods or even the wherewithal or tenacity to integrate all the back-end systems. And most of you who've been through M&As know this to be true. So they're orphaned. So we have hundreds, thousands actually, of systems that are just orphaned, that were there for a specific company at one point in time, but now they have integrations going in and out of them, making it work for now. Hundreds of data sources I talked about. ERPs are just one of them. Our data warehouses, I think every single operating company had their own at one point in time and would not let it go. We talked about the ERPs. Also, web methods is one of our local favorites. We have thousands. And when I say thousands, I mean thousands and thousands of web methods integrations that are pointing and shooting all over the company. And it's not the classic pub sub that you were hoping for. They're literally normalized integrations. You could almost call them interfaces in some point in time. So the data is harmonized in the integration. It's almost useless to any other product or any other source other than the actual integration that it was meant for. Works great. It's like a vein delivering blood to a specific organ. Works great for that purpose, but it can't be reused for anything else, and it's a real big problem. Our company couldn't get a single view of even several operating companies when we were analyzing M&As, or we were looking to drive profitability, or we were looking at manufacturing sites or network strategies. And when I say network strategies, talking about supply chains, manufacturing sites, distribution channels. These types of things took a very long time and expensive projects to pull together just to get to prove a single theory correct or incorrect. And every time we tried to get some legs under consolidating our ERPs or consolidating our data warehouses, they failed, and they failed miserably. In fact, they failed in a way that in many cases we were better off not starting them to begin with. So we literally just added to the problem in many cases. Okay, so what did we do? Okay, this was the birth of our enterprise data grid. Using Geode, in our case, a Gem Fire solution. A data grid was built to be the intersection or the centerpiece of all of these different data sources within Johnson & Johnson. And this is why I think it's important for the audience to understand our journey to get here may or may not be similar to other people's journeys. In deeply homogenized companies, probably not a big deal to bring all your data together into one source. In fact, probably thinking, we do that all the time. It's crazy. But in our company, where we have hundreds of operating companies, it was absolutely a very big deal. We built this in-memory grid using Geode. It does connect into hundreds of our back-end systems. Right now, you see we're ingesting from 50 plus, but it's connecting in to hundreds of our systems. And it is providing two functions. One, it's providing the single repository for our raw data, our curated data, but it's also providing a bidirectional integration layer for end-to-end solutions, which I'll share with you in a second, and where we're really getting value from this out of the use cases. Okay? Let me just check to make sure I talk through everything. It's providing the API marketplace for us, so we are getting on the front end, we are getting solutions plugging into the front of it. It is allowing us to isolate, process, and change. I'll talk a little bit, if there's time, I'll talk a little bit about one of our enterprise planning solutions where we are doing the supply network planning across the entire supply chain by really just isolating this and the data that's required to do this in isolation of the rest of the events around the company. And we're doing this using the data grid as a bidirectional component for that. Of course, it's the time to value, because once now we're getting this data into the grid and we're getting these data models harmonized and curated, now we're finding that people are lining up to drink from the well, right? It was very expensive to get here, But now that we're here, we're finding that the customer and the line to get this data out of here is extremely, extremely long. So long, in fact, that we're trying to find new ways to satisfy our demand. We're becoming the new ERP, if you will. The good news is, though, that we have redirected a lot of our spend from ERP. So again, for those of you in the audience who are IT professionals and see these things shift all the time, this was a big deal for us. We were a heavy SAP and JDE shop, and anything that we wanted to get done had to run through the capital of JDE or SAP for us. But not anymore. Now we're using the data grid as our as our central source, our central view for not just data, not just looking at data, but actual transactions. So we're able to use this now as our virtual ERP to get answers that we could never get before because we're seeing the company as one whole unit. Okay, here's an illustration of this. It's a bit of a high level. I won't go into each of the specifics. I'm not sure that there's time, but I'll try to get the broad strokes for you. As well, and then if you read, it really reads left to right. It probably doesn't look much different than what you would have constructed, in your own companies. But towards the far left, we have our data sources. Again, ERPs are the biggest. Again, we have 60 plus ERPs, primarily SAP and JDE, but there are some others in the ecosystem as well. We also have our data warehouses and our master data management. We have master data management systems that we've been using as a proxy for something like a grid for years, where we've been working on harmonized customers, harmonized products, and harmonized general ledgers for our finances. So we do have some of those out there as well. We're using Informatica, we're using Spring XD, we're using SAP's SLT product. We're even using a niche company called Simplement to grab those SAP cluster tables that are so hard to get to. We're using that for ingestion, and we're bringing that in, and there's a whole process around that, and it's something we thought was going to be very easy and is not. So many nuances that we could think of around timing. We call it change data capture. Timing of ingesting data, trigger points, quality checks, reliability, monitoring. Once you, I would say, reroute the vein, right, from the heart to something else, it's a big responsibility. So we had a lot of downstream systems that were now counting on this data. We had to build in a lot of resiliency for this. Okay, within the grid, it's one single grid with three components. One is the controller, which basically brings the data in. The other is the raw data that just sits into the grid. The raw data is of some use to our data scientists, especially if it has the metadata. So they are taking the raw data and either dumping it into a lake or just doing their analyses there in memory. But the real power here is getting the curated data. So we have an entire business function of teams that are doing the data modeling little by little. It's a big effort. And they're using the business modeling rules engines, building out those models. We're pumping the data through. And once it becomes curated, it's available for consumption for just about anybody. They can access the data through different venues, different APIs, different solutions that they have, or they can just take it in and dump it into a report. Okay? I can answer more questions about this offline, or I can put you in touch with some of our technical architects on why decisions were made around that. Here are a few quick facts around this that make this at least powerful for us. We have 55 terabytes of data in memory right now, and it's growing. So it's a good thing. Data's in memory. We can get to it very quickly. We can do what we want with it in microseconds. Bad news there is it's becoming very expensive, so we need to find some alternative there. We do keep our raw data and our curated data in the same place. It's one single grid. It's accessible, and we do have it spread through 3 geographical regions. There's a whole data center strategy around that, on-prem, off-prem, that we're using. Right now, we're hardwired into 50 source systems, what we've ingested from more so far. 12,255 tables. I got to believe it's accurate. I mean, it's a very specific number. The big one for me was 32 billion rows of data, and we're not done. So we have some ERP systems now, like the Vision Care one, that have billions of rows of data in their environment just alone. So we've got to figure out, what our real strategy is around bringing this data in and keeping it in memory, or where we're going to keep it. Okay, so why Gem Fire Geode? And you guys know this already much better than I do, but I mean, Gem Fire was selected years ago by our architects. It had a high degree of concurrency, high degree of resiliency, reliability. We're not one of those companies that are on Wall Street that needed that needed the high speed, the uptime, those types of things that may be valued over having a system that can take all this data. For us as a manufacturing company, we can deal with downtime in a lot of our business continuity plans, probably to a larger extent than some of our other companies can. But the real power here was it was the leading product on the market at the time that gave us the ability to handle all of this data in a reliable way and allowed us to do some of the things I showed you earlier, allowed us to build solutions off of this that our business really needed. And this is just an example. I cherry-picked a few of the solutions for you. I don't need to read these. I know some of these by heart because we built them. But some of these, you can see the wide range of solutions that we used. Everything from financial information, right, bringing together unified tax strategies, looking at close processes, we call universal ledgers, something that we would never be able to do before. So now we're getting insights around our financials that used to come months and months after our close. Okay, we have field inventory. Again, at J&J, we don't keep all of our inventory in warehouses. We have our inventory sometimes in the trunks of sales reps around the world. This is extremely inconvenient when there's surgery scheduled the next day or traumas that happened the night before. Now we can see where all of our medical devices, our kits, our sterilization, our surgical products are. As we deploy them out into the field, it doesn't matter where they are. We know exactly where they are, because they're being tracked and traced through the grid. We have bidirectional movements. Sales reps can now go on in minutes, find what they need, find where it is, and have it shipped to the hospital for surgery the next day. I'll go for one more because we're a little bit low on time. Global planning is another one. Global planning and global transportation are cut from the same cloth. These are both instrumental in order for us to get product from one place to the other. So when I talk about importance to us, having this information going through our grid as an integration layer is an extremely high leap of faith for our company. I mean, again, they were in love with the web methods, point-to-points. Now we're asking them, pull the information through the grid. We'll service as an integration layer, and we will give you the data for future analytics, which is tremendously important. And now we're just beginning to scratch the surface, but these types of analytics now that we're training people to look for things that weren't there are becoming very eminent for them. I can't share them all with you. A lot of this stuff was scraped out by my communications department, simply because it's just a little bit proprietary and a little bit sensitive to where we're going with some of this stuff. But you can imagine having information across hundreds of nodes in your network or your supply chain now at your disposal, and being able to analyze them in memory can provide a few insights that you may not have had before. Okay, I just got the 5-minute warning, so I'm going to touch on learnings and see if we can take a question or two. But the learnings that we had on our journey, again, this story was meant to be from a journey of a large company trying to do something nimble and agile, which really doesn't work very well. So some of the things that we learned early was perfect is the enemy of good. And now obviously it's not my line, but Covey would be proud. This was very true for us. We just had to keep doing things, right? We just had to keep doing things that were good enough, and we were making progress, and we were getting there. We were always finding reasons why we weren't perfect, but it didn't matter. We just kept winning one success after the next, which goes into the next one. Experiment fast and succeed fast. Notice how I didn't put fail fast. Failing fast around our company isn't a popular thing to do. I know it's a popular thing to say, but we really wanted to try to succeed more than we failed. And we did use the word learnings a lot, and we did fail, of course, but we kept our failures as small as possible. But I always like to make sure when I'm encouraging people to experiment, I like to encourage them to experiment to succeed, not necessarily to fail. So this was a big thing, and we had a lot of successes here. Really changed our perspective around build versus buy. Now that we're moving towards the cutting edge or the bleeding edge on some of these applications, we can no longer buy everything. I mean, we're a company that normally bought our technology and integrated it in, but now we're in an area where the offering wasn't what we needed, wasn't really fitting the need of what we had to do, so we built it. So we've got more developers than we ever had. We're a pharmaceutical company, make medical devices, but now we've got delivery centers, development centers around the world helping us build this product out and filling the gaps in. Two more learnings that I had that I would take an end-to-end ecosystem view, not just a product view for us. As you saw that diagram, what you didn't see was on the other side of both of those ends were hundreds of applications that are instrumental to serving our end-to-end product line or our end-to-end financial flow. And even one of those nodes in the system or one of those components in the system can hurt you if you don't look at it from an end-to-end view. And you need to understand what your customers want because they won't always tell you, right? They will tell you kind of what they need, and if they tell you, pieces of it, you can figure out the rest. But you need to understand their business model and look at it end to end, because now we're getting requests for real-time streaming data that we didn't necessarily architect in from the beginning because we didn't ask the right questions and we didn't look at this from an end-to-end perspective. Of course, that was needed all along. We just didn't look at it that way. And then finally, at least for us, and again, I would say don't miss the opportunity to instantiate new process models and best practices. We now have teams that are flow-based teams. These are agile teams working in pods and working left to right using flow techniques. We're literally a manufacturing company of software within our company now. This is something that an old waterfall company would have never thought of in the past. But we're using these types of initiatives now to redefine the way we're thinking, and it's really making in my opinion, some groundbreaking change for us. The product itself is amazing. It's delivering on everything it promised. We have some challenges with cost and duration still, of course, like any new product. But we're very excited about this, and we're very excited to share that with you today. I believe I must be close to, if not out of time by now, but I hope you were able to enjoy this. I talked as fast as I could because I was getting the cues real early around taking up the time. But I did want to thank you for your time and thank you for this opportunity.